Okay, so when I say the name Frankenstein, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For more than a century, that name has meant one thing to most of us, one of the most famous figures in horror. But what if the monster we all think we know isn't the real monster at all? Let's get into it.
I'm guessing you're picturing a huge green-skinned guy, right? Bolts sticking out of his neck, kind of stumbling around, making these grunting noises. Yeah, that guy. He's everywhere. Movies, Halloween costumes, you name it. That's the image that pop culture has burned into our brains for decades.
But now, listen to this. This is how the creature actually talks in Mary Shelley's novel. He's not grunting. He's incredibly well-spoken, intelligent, and he's wrestling with these huge philosophical ideas. I mean, that one quote just completely shatters the Hollywood version of the monster and tells us there's something much, much deeper going on here.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question, the one that's been at the heart of this story for over 200 years. If the creature is this tragic, complex being, then who is the real monster in this story? Or what is it?
So where do we even begin our investigation? Well, it seems only right to start with the man who kicked this whole thing off, Victor Frankenstein. Let's start by building the case against the creator.
Victor's story is just this cascade of terrible decisions. First, you've got this insane, unchecked ambition. And it's not about helping humanity, mind you. It's all about glory for himself. This ambition makes him totally secretive, cutting himself off from everyone who loves him. Then, he actually does it. He builds a being out of scavenged body parts. But the absolute most damning part, the very second his creation comes to life, Victor is so disgusted that he just runs away. He abandons his child in a world it knows nothing about.
And to really understand this deep theme of failed creation, you kind of have to look at the author's own life. Mary Shelley's world was just steeped in loss. Her own mother, the famous writer Mary Wollstonecraft, died just 10 days after giving birth to her. Later, Mary Shelley herself lost 3 of her own 4 children. So this idea of creation being immediately tangled up with death and abandonment, that wasn't just a clever plot device. It was her lived reality, and you can feel that pain on every single page.
But Victor's story is really only half of it. To get the full picture, we have to hear from the creature himself. His whole argument is that he wasn't born a monster, he was made one.
And this is where it gets so tragic, because you see this bizarre, twisted parallel between them. They both end up completely alone, but for totally different reasons. Victor chooses to be isolated, first because of his obsession, and later because of his guilt. The creature, on the other hand, is desperate for connection, but he suffers total isolation because everyone rejects him. One is lashing out because his pride is hurt, the other is lashing out from a place of just soul-crushing loneliness.
The creature's childhood, if you can call it that, is basically a crash course in human cruelty. He's born into the world completely alone, confused, with no parent to teach him anything. But then he finds this little sliver of hope. He secretly watches a family, the DeLazys, and learns everything from them: language, history, what's right and wrong. He starts to believe that people are inherently good. But the moment he finally musters the courage to reveal himself, hoping for that connection he craves, he's met with pure horror and violence.
And that right there, that's the absolute tragedy of it all. The creature didn't start out evil. He was born with a gentle nature, but it was just twisted and curdled into rage because every single human he met rejected him. His monstrosity wasn't something he was born with. It was a learned behavior. You could almost say that humanity itself taught him exactly how to be a monster.
So as you can see, this story is so much more than just a gothic horror tale. It's a timeless warning about ambition and responsibility, and honestly, it feels more urgent today than ever as we grapple with things like AI and genetic engineering.
The book's full title is a huge clue: Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. So who was this Prometheus guy? Well, in Greek mythology, he was a titan who stole fire, which is really a symbol for knowledge and technology, from the gods and gave it to humanity. He was a creator who actually cared about his creation, but he was punished forever for breaking the rules.
So how does Victor stack up as a modern Prometheus? Well, just like the original, he steals a sacred power, the secret of life. But that's where the comparison ends. Look at the motivation. Prometheus did it to help humanity. Victor did it for his own ego. And the relationship to their creations, Prometheus cared for mankind. Victor took one look at his and bolted.
So the consequence is a kind of poetic justice. Prometheus was punished by the gods, Victor is punished and ultimately destroyed by his own creation.
And Shelley's novel basically forces us to ask this massive question, a question that is incredibly relevant right now. In our world of AI, cloning, and genetic modification, does our constant push for more knowledge need some ethical guardrails? Victor's story is the ultimate cautionary tale about what happens when ambition has no conscience.
All right, so after looking at the evidence against both the creator and the created, we're right back where we started. Who is the real monster of Frankenstein?
The thing is, the blame isn't simple. It's not a clear-cut case. You've got Victor, whose ambition and neglect are basically the original sin of the whole story. You've got the creature, who suffers so much that he becomes a murderer. And then you've got this third suspect, society itself, whose blind prejudice and fear helped create the very monster it was so terrified of.
In the end, the genius of this novel is that it doesn't give you an easy answer. The reason we're still talking about it all these years later is because that question of who the real monster is remains so powerful and, well, ambiguous. And maybe that's the whole point. The real monster isn't one character on a page. It's the capacity for monstrous behavior that lies in all of us, through our ambition, our neglect, or our prejudice against things we don't understand.